Life isn't what you imagine, not the dreams you once had, but it's all full of love and purpose. And for that, you'll be glad. Love comes from your wife and your sweet daughter, your heart's pure delight. You don't know it yet, but feeling small isn't your blame. It stems from things beyond you, not a mask of shame. Our parents are trying. Their love runs deep and wide. One day you'll understand their sacrifice and so much more. Listening will be a struggle, or learning will be a struggle. Reading and writing a climb. Help won't come easy, but you'll find your rhythm in time. The feeling of being less than will linger for a while, but the skills you develop will one day make you smile. At first, you'll mask your struggles, but soon they'll help you soar. These gifts will build your future, open many doors. So hear me clearly. You don't need to be the best. Just be yourself in all you do, and life will do the rest. Dream big, stay confident, keep learning. As you grow, life works out one day at a time. Much more than you ever knew. You're going to be okay. That's a poem. It's a letter that I wrote to myself, and I turned it into a poem for today. And in essence, I was just reflecting on how I grew up, and I was looking at where I am today, and that's where it brings me to the podcast. We'll see if we can get it back up here. And so my name is Sam Esquivel, and I'm the host of the Failed Podcast. I've been doing it since around 2017, navigating through a few rebrands along the way. And those years of podcasting have taught me more than just the technical aspect of the medium. They allowed me to have a deeper understanding of storytelling, connection, and communication. And so podcasting is my passion, because it's given me the platform to share lessons that I've learned from my story. More importantly, it has allowed me to create a space where others can share their challenges, failures, and growth transformations through their stories into powerful tools of inspiration and learning. I serve people who want to start podcasting, but not from a purely marketing or business perspective. My approach is different. I believe that if your podcast is authentic and you communicate it well, those ideas will get you ahead. And so for me, it's about learning and teaching and connection and making opportunity through podcasting. The key is simple to start. Not perfection is needed, and to develop the ability to communicate in a way that resonates with others. My focus is coaching people in the art of storytelling. And I do this in several ways. On my podcast, I invite guests on and I interview them. I've interviewed hundreds of people. And so I've learned the intricacies of talking and communicating and prompting and asking the right questions. I'm a little bit ahead of an AI in that, right? But I'm not as good. But the human connection is what I do. Understanding body language, understanding why someone says something or how they deliver something. I catch it and I'll zoom in on stuff that people don't naturally want to zoom in on, but I create it in a way that makes them comfortable. And that's why storytelling for me is such a powerful tool. And when I do storytelling, there's 3 C's that I focus on. The first one is communication, confidence. We'll turn that off. Communication, confidence, and connection. I believe that when you share your story and you know your story, you're able to communicate it well. But once you communicate it well, you start connecting with people. And when you connect with people on a deeper level, it builds a confidence in yourself. You can walk into rooms, you can walk into meetings, you can walk in a place where you don't need to be, but you're walking in as yourself. And that's the power that I believe comes from storytelling. And so as I preach this, my focus is those 3 C's. And I do it in any way, whether it's coaching a business or an individual, and I give them their story back. Share your story with me, and let me give it right back to you, but let me give you a different perspective. And sometimes in life, we're all looking for great conversations as well. And I believe that not everyone gets to experience great conversations. It's a difficult thing. You got to be aware of the person talking and what you're saying. And so I like to create great conversations. And believe it or not, people, I do sessions where I just communicate with someone. And what I give them is a great conversation. And so when they leave, they have a better understanding of themselves. And then now they've been introduced to a great conversation. And so I believe every conversation that I have is great, but I'm putting effort forward and making connections in that way. And so thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a bit of my journey and passion with you today. And obviously I look forward to the Q&A section coming up. And that is my time. Thank you.
Sam, I know you're doing some work with the Hispanic Chamber lately, so tell us what you're doing over there for them.
Absolutely. I'm a member of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. They have a podcast studio in their office. It's available for all the members. So I redid it, replugged everything in, and I made a video so that everyone knows how to use it. But I'm there as a consultant, so if someone wants to launch, as a member, I'm able to help them, at better rates, and I'm more available for them. We have about 900 plus members, and so we're hoping to motivate them to share what they have, whether it be short-term or long-term, but I'm working with them on the podcast side. Yeah. Yes.
I have two questions. One, who are you inviting in on your podcast? And then two is, what is it like to have coaching for someone who wants to start a podcast?
Very good. So I have a variety, anyone is welcome. They have to have something interesting about themselves, but I'm not saying it in a demeaning way, but I like to focus on failures and challenges. And so if you have failures and challenges in your life that really have taught you something, you don't know what it is and you need to hone it down, you're a perfect guest for me. So you'll come in, sit down, we'll talk about what did you go through? How did you feel? And then I said, what are the lessons that you learned through those failures and challenges? And the goal is for the listener to catch those. And so their speed hump won't be as big as yours because they're hearing your perspective. And so it's open to anyone. I do vet it to a certain degree because they do need to be real good at communicating. So sometimes a few coaching sessions beforehand are necessary to kind of get them there. But I'm open to having, if anyone in here may be interested, let me know. What was the second question?
As far as you coaching someone to start their own podcast, what does that look like?
So starting a podcast, you can probably do it in 30 minutes. Really, it's really easy to start one. So when I come in, I say, what do you want to share? How do you want to share it? And how do your 10 plus episodes look? Get you comfortable with what's going on so that you can be in it long term. And so a lot of people start and finish very fast because it's a lot of work, especially if you're like guest driven, it's hard to get guests. But if you're talking on your own, you've never really tested yourself to talk 45 minutes at a time with, as perfect as possible. Obviously there's room for editing and stuff. And so I coach people through that. But as far as the technical side, I take care of it from start to finish. I have a few studios. I sit down, it's plug and play. People come in and they record. And so I make it easy for people to launch a podcast. But yes, sir.
So one of the hardest things when you start a podcast is getting people to know about it.
Yes.
How do you recommend marketing it, growing your audience, getting more downloads, getting more sales conversions, whatever it is you're after?
Yeah. So there's two approaches. One is the organic way, and people kind of frown on that because it's slower. But if you're in it long term, it adds up. And so shaking hands and always being available and saying, here's who I am. I have a podcast. Follow me, however you're promoting it, right? That's the simple way. But people get away from that because they're focusing on the marketing side and they're like, I have a funnel, I'm paying this company. So they sit back and wait. But my biggest leaps and rewards in podcasting have come from the connections that I've made. Hence, me being here was not from an algorithm. It wasn't from paying someone to market me. It was from me connecting with individuals. And a lot of the doors that I've walked through have happened because of that. And so that's the organic side. On the other side, it's all about, so there's podcasts are now video/audio. Back when they first started, it was audio based. So you got to learn the game on YouTube. And then at the same time, your social media in essence can push the audio version than you pushing the audio version on its own. There's a lot of people who listen to podcasts now. So the new challenge is there's too many. There's a subject matter on every subject, and then there's multiple podcasts on any given subject now. And so really the connection, the direct connection with people really pays off the most. And as a podcaster, if you do interviews, that is one of the easiest ways for you to cross contaminate. In other words, who you influence, share them with me. I'll share my influences with you, and that's low cost. That's relational, and I like that way. So if you did want to start and you had guests, look at it that way, right? See people who are moving and working, and you don't have to motivate them to market. Collab with them, and that for me, that's worked really well. Yes, sir.
So I like listening to you talk, but I'm a little confused about so I think you're talking to us with two hats. One hat is promoting your own podcast where you talk to people about their struggles, and that's a channel that can kind of help people learn from others' mistakes, which is cool. That's great.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. The other one, it seems like you're being a coach to help other podcasters learn how to get in to have their own channels.
Absolutely.
So are those separate, or is that together?
They're separate, but if someone wants to say, how do I hold Sam accountable? How can I check Sam? What's my resume? My resume is my podcast. So I talk about that anytime I am pitching storytelling or coaching, because I don't have, the hours to sell you on me. But if you go watch me, you can decide, oh, Sam's got it. He's paid his dues. I see him communicate. I see what he's doing. And so I use it in that way. So it's strategic, but the podcast is my passion. Interviewing people is my passion. And in doing so, I ended up with a few studios and some knowledge and some equipment, and that's where that part comes in. So it's one hat, but it's the same thing.
I'm not sure, we haven't asked you how we can help, but if you're trying to just have more, helping more people, it seems like your coaching side could maybe morph into a social media overall.
Yeah.
And if you advertise that separately as kind of an entity of itself,
Got it.
Might be, I don't know, maybe that's not the direction you want to take. But
No, but I'm learning that on how I am. So the coaching thing has developed through my podcast. And so now I'm having to step in and learn what it's going to take to turn it into a coaching business or approach it that way. And so you're kind of seeing me in the development phase. Right now, I'm doing a few companies, a few small groups. I do a lot of one-on-ones, but I'm learning as I go, but at the same time, I'm learning through my failures. And so you sharing that with me helps me, and I'll kind of look into that a little bit more. But yeah.
Because there's a lot of businesses that need help with social media.
Got it, yeah.
And it's basically telling their story, which is not as long as a podcast necessarily, but very much you have the credentials because of what you've been doing.
Yeah. And I do. So everyone I help share their story doesn't start a podcast. So that's so someone may call me and say, Sam, I want to share my story. I went through this in my childhood and I don't know how to share it. And then so I coach them. So at their next meeting, their next family reunion, they'll bring it up, but in a new light. And so that's where the confidence and the development that their story comes in. But yeah, I don't know if that you helped me, but that I hope that kind of helped answer what you said. So yes, sir.
A comment to the question.
Yes, sir.
First, I want to celebrate you for being around since 2017. You're an OG.
I am.
You're probably in the top 3% of podcasters from a longevity standpoint. Most people, like you said, they get in, they do 10 episodes, it's hard, and then they're out.
Yep.
So great work.
Thank
Keep
you.
it up. Second, my question is, do you have sponsors for the podcast? Like, how do you cover production costs?
Yeah.
Are you looking for it to be a revenue generator?
I am, but I don't know that game. That's where Chad was telling me he's in marketing. So eventually I'll have to tap into that. I do have people who kind of invest in me. They're the ones who hire me and come and speak and do coaching. And so that helps, but directly with the podcast, not yet. But we're moving in that direction. But right now I'm producing about 4 or 5 podcasts, and so they pay me per episode and stuff. And it's kind of like that funnel has come through the Feld podcast. And so I'm partnering up with a few other studios to do the consulting side of the communication, not the marketing or business side of it. So to be blunt, I suck at the business side of it, but I specialize in the communication side of it. And so that's where my focus is.
So what's your preference? Producing and creating your own pod or producing other people's pods?
Well, in producing other people's pods, I get the opportunity to coach them. And so it goes back to me coaching them communicate. But at some point, they will outgrow me, and then they'll need a marketing company and so on. And then it'll be like the $1 million baby. At some point, they'll go, and then they'll go and they'll get what they need. But I help them in the beginning and help them understand and communicate with themselves. And so if they give me an idea, say, everyone says, I want to start a podcast, so I want to help people. Okay, that's too vague, and so I help them really narrow that down, but not based on the books and stuff or what motivates them like on social, but on what motivates them internally, because I know that there's a lot of content there, for lack of a better term, and so I prefer to help them use that to kind of fuel their podcast, you know. Yes, sir.
So obviously you mentioned there's a lot of podcasts out there. Do you ever find that instead of creating their own podcast, people should tap in and make those connections to the podcasts that are out there and almost do like when somebody writes a book, right? They go on book tour and they go, like, is there have you coached anybody or worked with anybody where you say, I don't think you need a podcast, but there's all these other podcasts out there that maybe you should go get on.
Yeah.
Probably looking for a guest. So like, have you ever dealt with that dynamic?
I have. You have to be like very influential, like as an individual. Yeah. So in order for that to work, if not, you build your influence through your pod, through making content, and people can check you. And so if you are really, really relevant, you write your own book, you have a following, maybe you have a church or an organization, you have 5 to 1,000 people that either invest in you or listen to you, then they could do podcast only. But typically it's a speaker that's speaking on a subject that could do pods, because for them it's gonna funnel to their speaking, their book, and so on. But for someone who's just like starting off, it'll be so hard, because at the end of the day, people are trading influence. And so I gotta, you know, if your influence isn't big, but you push social real well, let's trade some influence, you know what I mean? Because on my end, I'll help you see behind the scenes and what it takes to produce a podcast. Yeah. Yes, sorry.
I'm just piggybacking off of what Marco had said earlier in regards to kind of the business and marketing side that you said was not necessarily your strong point. Have you considered partnering with someone for specifically that, where maybe they have a business that highlights specifically marketing, that you guys can go ahead and actually work off of each other to that capacity?
I have. It's a joke, but it's also serious. At the end of the day, it's just too expensive for me right now. You like to partner up with like a marketing company?
Well, not necessarily something like that, but another small business, someone who you'd be able to go ahead and actually essentially trade back and forth customers.
Absolutely.
I've done that. Now, granted, marketing is not my forte necessarily, but I've done that with my business, where I've had my standalone business, they've had their standalone business, and then we collaborate together and transfer back and forth clients. Yeah.
So. Well, oddly enough, have y'all heard of Matchpoint Coffee Shop? It's by the medical school. It's a new coffee shop. I'm partnering up with them. They have a podcast studio in there. And so what happens is all these people talk to them, and now he's funneling everyone to me, and then we sit down, and I don't know if that's similar, but he's helping me in that. And we're gonna create like a branch of what I'm doing through him. And so that's where I'm producing a few podcasts. And he has some history in storytelling on a very national level. But he's very humble. But he's graciously allowed me to partner up with him. And so I'm working with them as well. And so I'm hoping, it feels kind of in that direction.
So it seems like you already have an audience, what are you doing to market your coaching to your audience, the people that are already listening to you? Because anybody can start a podcast. And
Yes.
nobody really knows how, if we're being honest, right? We all have to like learn how to do it. So how are you marketing to your audience that's currently already engaged with you, already bought into you, already knows you, already likes you?
Got it. So my audience, I'm not marketing to them. I'm marketing storytelling and be better through your failures. That's because that's my passion. I want to help people, and it's through that. But it's organically allowed me in front of certain people, and then that's whenever I kind of sell the coaching side. So for instance, I was having coffee the other day. 2 ladies were talking next to me, and I connected with them because they were doing calligraphy. And I said, well, who are you? What do you do? And I connected with them. And it turns out they're 2 principals for 2 big schools. And I'm going to go hopefully talk to their teams about storytelling. And so for me, the one-on-one is my marketing game. And even though it seems so little, but for me, it works really well. And I love connecting from a storytelling perspective. And I did a session with them right there, you know what I mean? And so that's that's what works for me.
I would just suggest
Yes.
Somehow plugging in your coaching to what you're doing, because those people are looking. If they're not finding it from you, they're looking at from somewhere else, and it's like you're already a gold mine. And so you're just gonna have to step over that bound, and maybe it's you're sponsoring your own podcast.
Got it.
And that's your like ad
Yes.
for it. And so it's not super salesy, but it's like there because you already have a following.
Yeah. Thank you. I will do that. Yes.
I think this question piggybacks on that question and some others. So I think to make it clear, who are or who is your target customer or test customer?
That's so funny. No one's gonna. If you're in marketing, you're not gonna like this answer. But so I walk into an old folks home, okay, with hundreds of people in there, and I see them as potential collaborators with me, right? And then I walk into a group of young adults in my church, and I see them as collaborators with me. Is it transactional every time? No, but that's how I look at every interaction. Even in this room, you are all, because you have a story, and maybe you just need the opportunity to share it. Your name or no name, it doesn't matter. And so that's how I approach every conversation, and that's why I think I do have great conversations, but I don't know if that helps, but I want to say everyone, but it isn't everyone. But I want to capture as many stories as possible, and it's just a matter of me finding it in whoever gives me the opportunity. Because you can't like, it's on a one-on-one thing. It's the only way that I can help develop people's stories, you know. And so that either against me or that's what makes me really strong in what I'm doing.
So really anybody with a failure.
That is the common ground for us to start on. But if it's someone that just wants to share their story because they're either growing as influencers or they want to be more impactful, it doesn't have to be from a failure perspective, but naturally, those are bookmarks in people's lives. It could be positive leaps in their lives. I graduated, I got married, and those are great. But then I say, well, what did you learn from your marriage? How hard was it to graduate? And then that's when I bring the failure, because that's what we can learn from and teach. And we're more humble when we talk about our failures than our successes.
What's your name?
Sean.
So I'm gonna have to talk to you, but I had a podcast, and one of the things that I noticed when I had it, and it was last year, I always mentioned my services.
Got it.
So I kind of did like, hey, my name is, Vanna, I provide this. And then I would get into interviewing the person that I was interviewing. And what I've learned was I started getting random people asking for my services.
Got it.
And
Yeah.
contacting me
Yeah.
for the services. And so that may be something like every introduction, you can also talk about like you are doing the coaching, and then when people are like watching your videos, like whoever watches it, you're gonna get random people reaching out wanting to know like, what is it like for your services? Can
Absolutely.
you do this? Now I stopped mine. I want to pick it back up. That's what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
But I stopped for my own personal reasons. But I do think that like if you're trying to get into the coaching, because I'm a person that does coaching and then I do operational, and so sometimes it's one of those things where I don't know which one do I want to actually do the coaching or do I prefer to do the operational? And sometimes it's both, because then I can do that as a coach. I'm still coaching other people and doing their operations.
Yes.
So just something to think about when you're doing your introductions to your podcast.
Yeah, well, note taken. That's 2 already. I will do. I'm going to do that. Like I'm going to look into that and make that happen. Yes.
Thank you so much for being brave to stand up there and share with all of us. That was amazing.
Thank you.
As somebody who values service, who values that human connectivity, I'm curious as to like, what would you tell, whether it's on the individual side of selling your podcast alone or on the coaching side, like what do you tell prospective clients, like to pick you, like why choose you over anyone else that is very inspirational, or they're super passionate about helping people, right? What makes you stand out the most out of everybody else? And why should we?
Well, for me, it's about connection. So the way I stand out is by sitting and having coffee and talking with someone. So even if I talk to 10 people and I get the opportunity to talk to one, that is my funnel. It's a very slow burning thing. And so it's like, who needs to have a great conversation? Just sit at a table and have that conversation. And from there, they understand a little bit more about themselves. And then that's how I gain clients, is through conversation. Up to now, I haven't done the pitch in my podcast, so I haven't experienced that. For me, it's just people in front of me, like right now. And then obviously, not obviously, sorry, but I'm learning that. I'm learning, but I have several circles that I move in, so I'm always in contact with people. So I've never had a struggle to help someone share their story, because I was in youth leadership for 15 plus years, and I've had hundreds of young people in front of me, and then I've always been in leadership positions, so I've always been able to talk to people. And then I also lead a men's group, and in that men's group I have all these guys that come and talk to me, and I help them. They don't know it's the 3 C's or storytelling, but I'm guiding them. And then the day they ask me, I tell them, here's what I'm doing, here's what we've been doing. That's why it seems very you-centric, because I'm working the storytelling part of it. And a conversation with me sounds very different than if I'm doing a session, because it really is about you, and I just use pieces of me to guide you in sharing what you're trying to say a bit more. We'll go here and then we'll go back to chat.
I would just say, because one thing about podcasts, especially ones that are bigger, they're known to pay someone to come on. I know one thing about you, you're very relationship driven. So I would incorporate that a little bit into your podcast, talk about how you met people, because people that listen to your podcast, they're connecting to you. Like honestly, the podcast I listen to, I don't listen to it. I listen to the people because I like the people. And I like the guests that they bring on. So you're a little bit different because you're building relationships everywhere you're going. So not only can you say, hey, I met this person through here, here, and here, and then you can say what everybody else is saying. Like if you want to learn how to do it, how to bring out the real true form of someone, I'm here to help with that. And that is going to lead organic growth into your business. Great. It's marketing without marketing.
Yeah.
It's you being you.
Yeah.
So I would say incorporate that a little bit into just explain how you're out in these groups, how you're meeting these people every single time. Like the conversation, like you just said earlier, how you had a conversation with 2 principals. That just came organically from you talking to someone. Yeah. So I say incorporate that, and then at the very end, or actually I say up front, say that you do the services. At the very end, say that you do the services.
I like it.
And then don't lean on it. Just say, hey, I do this type of stuff if you want to do it, and then people will start coming straight to you.
I love it, man. Thank you. Let me say one thing. So in a podcasting, if you're interviewing, it works like this. They come for the guest, but they stay for the host. And just to emphasize what you're saying. So if you're starting, get good at hosting, communicating, interviewing, prompting, leading the conversation, because they will stay for the host.
Well, that's actually what I was going to respond to. Just kind of want to piggyback on what you said. Like, I've been paying attention to some personal research as I go to different places where I like to go. And I've noticed that the hosts of businesses, right, you walk in and there's someone at the front desk, generally poor conversationalists. I think it's an atrophying skill set, and you might be able to actually sell that.
To that, yeah.
Like, how do you actually have a conversation with someone who may or may not initially want to? but maybe they need to.
Yeah.
Right? And that just seems to come naturally to you, because like I'm an introvert and a recovering shy introvert. So starting a conversation with a stranger, I can do it, but I'm clumsy. And I don't know how to do it better. I would have to learn how to do it better.
So I'm an introvert, 100%. The greatest tool for an introvert is to have control. So my prompts are control. The microphone, if I'm teaching, if it's going this direction, that is where we find a lot of peace. You will be drained, but it's satisfying to our mind. And so I had this here, but it's 3,000 questions. I've read through this book and I read through it to teach people. These are so basic, like you can just type it in on chat and these will all pop up. But what can you turn these into? And then that's where the power behind storytelling comes in. And so with certain individuals, to break that ground, I just say, can I ask you a question? I read in one of these, and then from there, I continue to grow it. And they're like, what? That came from that question? And I would say, yeah, kind of, but I saw how you responded. I saw how you sped through this. I saw how you slowed down when you mentioned this. Why did you say that? Why did you use this terminology? The other day, someone used a terminology. They said, entitled. It was two individuals. One of them said it from a negative perspective, and from the other one, it was a positive perspective. So I said, you drew a line when you said that between you and your friend when you used the word entitled. And I broke it down for them, and their perspective changed. So next time they do share that sentiment, they're going to share it more deeply. And so one mom did good for herself and her daughter did good. So there was entitlement there. But the other friend, she did good and her daughter's doing good. They were just one generation apart, but the entitlement looked very different. But it was honorable in both. Someone did better for their kids. So I broke that down for them in a session, and I kind of gave them that. But it can come from simple things like this. So I read questions all the time.
Have you considered like putting together a workshop and hosting it at like Create Fort Worth or Ensemble or these different things? Because if you did something, and even if you charge like $25 a seat, one, that's a little bit money, like that's generating to pay for whatever. But one, if I'm paying for it, I'm buying into the class. Now you have my, you have my email, my phone number, and I've bought it and I've come, you've taught me, and now you can, at the end of your course, pitch me your coaching. But then I also took something from what I learned from you, and now I've implemented it into my business.
Yeah.
So now I've just bought into you.
I'm working on that. Through the chamber, I want to, and then I have a few other groups, but I haven't been able to, I'm still figuring out the nuances. Because in a session, my thing is this, like if it's 5 people, I can do one-on-ones, and everyone will be okay if I spend 15 minutes with you and so on. But if it's a group this size, then I'm teaching from one perspective here, and everyone capture the thing. But I'm developing it, so thank you for saying it.
The owner of Ensemble, what is her name? Tamara. She teaches a class about putting together classes like that.
Oh, okay.
And so maybe reaching out to her at Ensemble, I took her like workshop, and I feel like it changed the way that I pieced together a class for like a group. So maybe reach out to her and see.
Ensemble Tara at Ensemble. Tamara, very good, thank you. That's what the group does, by the way. You're watching it happen. So,
Okay.
yeah. It's,
I was also thinking, kind of building on that idea of like, maybe it's a cohort too. So to your point, like maybe it's 5 people at a time.
Yeah.
That all have like, but maybe you're in a similar stage, and they're learning from each other along with learning from you.
Yeah.
That might be another way to kind of approach it. Is it's not necessarily a big class workshop. Maybe it's a smaller one. Maybe the fee's a little bit more type of deal, right? But it gives you the opportunity to still have that one-on-one time. They all kind of grow and learn from themselves as well, and then you have a couple of them going at a time, maybe, right? Or stagger or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the storytelling aspect, the 3 C's, I can do from here for 45 minutes. But the coaching part of it, it really comes down because I need to connect and break things down for individuals. Yes.
I just want to point out a strength, and maybe you already know it, but if you know your strengths, you can help sell yourself. You said you're not a good marketer, but if you are talking people into sharing their failures in front of something that can go worldwide, that is a master marketer. And so you're...
I needed to hear that. Thank you.
You're having that ability to do that. Being able to teach that ability should be a major thing if you're coaching.
Okay.
Because getting people is not just, if you're podcasting, some podcasts just do talking, others or do that. Otherwise, is getting people to talk to you. And how in the world do you get people to go and share their failures publicly like that? I don't know. I mean, that would be a great course, I think.
I agree.
Thank you.
Because to be able to deep dive and touch someone and make them be, actually talk about, especially failures, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So I would say, I completely agree with that.
I'm amazed that you do it, actually.
Thank you. Yes.
So a lot of podcasts follow this kind of interview style, where it's a host interviewing a guest or guests.
Yeah.
I'm sure you encounter that as well. What would you say is your number one thing that a good interviewer does really, really well? And what would you say is your number one pet peeve about what an interviewer does poorly?
This is the fun part. Okay, so we'll start with the pet peeve. This is funny. So your podcast, don't do rabbit trails. The guest is not trained. They're not consistent behind the mic, so they're not doing it in ill will, but they'll go on rabbit trails for whatever reason, just because they're comfortable. My job is I have a story I'm trying to tell. I'll veer off. I call it degrees. I don't go 3 or 4 degrees off the topic. As soon as I feel like I'm 1-2 questions out, I'll do a hard stop and say, okay, now tell me when you went from elementary school to middle school. And I'll just cut it. And I have a 45-minute stop. And so I need to better my communication skills by putting a start and finish. And I do that for me, because if not, you can turn a 45-minute into a 3-hour, and really 25% of it is useful. The rest is just rambling and rabbit trails. And so I'm trying to share and pull something out of every guest. So I do have a story, I do have a direction, and I stick to it. And I tell my guests, I'm gonna interrupt politely, and then I might cut a story off right at the worst time, but we gotta tell your whole story. And so that's what I do. And so I also teach people how to, okay, Sam asked me this, I need to answer it. And then they start catching the rhythm and catching the flow. And sometimes I'll answer my own question and show them how concise I can answer and still be like deep about it. And I'll give them a hint, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I need to be more straight to the point, yeah. But those are a few things that I do. My pet peeve is rabbit trails. You got to know how to stop them. I specialize in it. That's what I do, so. Yes.
To carry out off of what Chad and Dimitri were saying, because you're taking it the other way by talking about their failures. Do you feel like the connection by you talking about their failures and how they overcame them or perceived them is building stronger connections?
Yeah, so for me, reading and writing, I grew up as English was my second language, and I struggled in school. So who I am comes from my story, and that's why I believe in it deeply. But the same principles of sharing your story apply to failure and what are you best at. Not what are you good at, what do you do more often, but I can also do an interview based on what are you amazing at. And it might be making omelets for someone. And then that's the topic I want. I don't really care about the career, the school, the achievements. And so that, it works in both of those. What are you best at or what do you fail? Those will bring the best out of people. And that's what I want to have an opportunity to communicate with, is the best version of themselves. And so when you can replace the regular thoughts that come from a failure to lessons and say, this was I fell off my bike, but I learned how to 1, 2, 3. Now when you think of these 3, you think of the bike when you fell off the bike. But when you think about falling off the bike, now you think about these 3 lessons. And so that helps people communicate better. And so that's why I focus on failure. I want to rebrand the Failure Podcast more on storytelling and great conversations. But it's just changing the word, but it's all the same for me.
Great.
Yes. We good? I know how to put a hard stop on stuff. Yes.
I'm trying to listen more than I talk this time, and I'm trying to put all the things together. So I'm going to run a scenario by you.
Go for it.
If I get it right. So let's say I have a B2C company, and let's say that I come to you because you give coaching and about how to do podcasts. And so we work together and we figure out a way for us to put a 10-episode arc together about how we're going to tell the brand of this company that I'm going to start. In that, you generate a lot of content, right? From
yes.
About how much time. What do you do with that content? How do you monetize it? What happens with it?
Okay, so whenever we create the content, what I do is it goes up on YouTube and then on a few audio platforms. So that's the easiest. And then I kind of coach them on how to do a few shorts, but then I advise them and say, hey, if you really want like SEO and funnels, then they'll have to find someone else to do it. But a podcast is a generator of every piece of content that you need to market. So it's audio, it's pictures, it's shorts, and it's, you name it. You can pull it from a 45-minute, 1 hour podcast because you have the visuals and the audio.
So in this scenario, you're saying that we'd sit down, you'd record all this for me, and then I would own the content, but then I would also be invited to process it myself.
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity for what we talked about earlier with partnering or maybe JV with another group that can help.
Got it. Yeah.
You've amassed so much content that you just said, it's helping video and text and pictures and audio, and I think there's a lot there to be looked into. I know there's
true though.
Time, you'll have 40 hours or however many hours in a week, but I just encourage you. Maybe there's a different angle there with take that content, really leverage it to its maximum.
I'll look at it makes sense. I haven't had no one look at all my hours and hours of video and say, hey, spit something out, see how we can market. But that's a good. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I enjoyed the questions. I hope I did good. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming, and your reward for being here today and presenting your 1 Million Cups tumbler.